After an illegal immigrant terrorist tried burning to death innocent peaceful Jews gathered on Boulder's world-renowned Pearl Street, Republicans offered a resolution condemning the attacks. An incredible 75 congressional Democrats voted against it, apparently caring more about an illegal foreign terrorist than American Jews, including a Holocaust survivor. Can you imagine? You've survived the Holocaust, you're late in life, you're in the United States of America, which is supposed to be the land of the free, and you're supposed to live peacefully after living through hell, and instead you end up with some guy throwing gasoline on you and lighting you on fire. That was an act that 75 congressional Democratic radicals could not condemn. Some of the same Democrats are fighting the big, beautiful bill, suggesting it will harm middle and low-income households, as if they really care about low-income and middle-income households. Yet this is the bill that eliminates taxes on tips and overtime. It substantially lowers the threshold for families to qualify for the child income tax credit. What are these radical left Democrats talking about? There couldn't be a more friendly bill to the lower and middle class of America. Should the federal government sell lands to pay down the debt, to lower overhead and improve the condition of precious wildlands and forests? Today we talk about all of this and more with Congressman Jeff Crank, who joins us in studio. Hit it, George.
Welcome to Wayne's World, rising above the noise and confusion.
It's Wayne's Word.
Oh.
You ever hear a story that makes you sit up and think, if he can do it, why not me? Scott Riopel built his life from scratch. No handouts, just hustle. Now he runs Interstate Roofing, part of the One Solutions family, and he's showing others the path out. If you're ready to change your life, follow him on Facebook and Instagram at big_Scott303. This isn't just roofing, this is a way up. At Integrity Bank and Trust, integrity is more than a name. It's a way of doing business. My family does business there, and I can tell you they are the friendliest and easiest we have worked with over decades as entrepreneurs and small business owners. Integrity's expert and friendly personnel offer home loans, treasury management, personal banking, and other services for every stage of life. Integrity puts customers first, living up to its name. Welcome, Congressman Jeff Crank, to Wayne's Word Studio.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming all this way and being here. Love to talk with you about a few things that you're doing in Congress right now. And this is your first term. You started January 3rd. And how's it going? How's the transition from private sector life to being in Congress?
Well, it's pretty good. I don't like all the miles, the frequent flyer miles back and forth, right? That's kind of the worst part of the job. But man, what an amazing opportunity. I say this all the time to folks that I was born and raised in Pueblo, Colorado. I was a middle class kid. If I can get elected to Congress, I mean, anybody can get elected to Congress. And I mean, it's just it says so much about America and what a great country we live in. And I'm awfully proud that, we have 750,000, a little over 750,000 citizens that I represent. It's pretty cool when they elect you to go back and represent them and be their voice in front of the federal government. It's pretty awesome.
So you recently were deposing Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary. And tell me a little about that. What was it that you wanted to talk to him about energy? And, of course, our Energy Secretary is Chris Wright from right here in Colorado, and he's an amazing appointment. But tell me about your conversation with Doug Burgum and what you wanted to achieve.
Well, sure, yeah. I serve, one of the committees I serve on is the House Natural Resources Committee, and Secretary Burgum came up to talk about all the things that they have to deal with federal lands and energy and all of that. And so each member of Congress on that committee gets 5 minutes to question them. So you got to be kind of rapid fire and get everything in. I didn't get to the wolf reintroduction, which I wanted to, but a couple of my colleagues had already done that. So I just saved my time for other things. But we talked a little bit about, certainly forest management, but energy and getting rid of some of the subsidies. The federal government, as you know, Wayne, has skewed subsidies towards green energy. And they were doing leases on public lands for oil and gas that were way more expensive than the leases they were doing for wind or solar or those sorts of things. And to me, we're getting screwed, right? As taxpayers, if they're giving these leases away when they could be giving them away at a higher price. And if we're going to be fair in the energy sector, we shouldn't be picking winners and losers and having the federal government decide that. So that was one of the things I was talking about. And Doug Burgum is getting parity in those leases now, to where if you do an oil and gas lease or a wind lease or a solar lease, they're all going to be pretty much comparable, and the federal government and the taxpayers going to benefit equally from those.
Great. I am a big believer in all of the above energy: solar, wind, geothermal, whatever you can come
Absolutely.
up with. Now we're talking about gravity-fed batteries, where basically you store the energy by using energy at peak time when there's a lot available, and you raise up weight. And then when you don't have energy available, you lower the weight, and that generates energy and levels out the grid.
Right.
I think that's brilliant. But
it is.
Honestly, we cannot anytime in anyone in the next 100, 200 years live without conventional fuels,
Right.
without fossil fuels. I mean, I like Chris Wright's approach to that, and I helped edit his latest book on this. And when you cut off fossil fuels, you cause energy poverty, which is just plain poverty. I toured Africa, and I saw it there. People cannot find liquid natural gas. There is no infrastructure that delivers natural gas or anything, any kind of power. So they need that. And we've made it so expensive they can't have it. So they burn dung, they burn garbage to heat and cook with, and it's killing people, and it's hurting the environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about the poverty that causes, right? Our economy today, we are such a wealthy country. We have such a high standard of living because we've focused on developing our natural resources and using energy efficiently and effectively. And the best way to do that is let the free market decide what works. And unfortunately, so many times we allow the government to step in, choose winners and losers. The free market, as you know, the free market's so much better at choosing winners and losers than any politician ever will be.
It's more benevolent than any top-down
Absolutely.
kind of dictates. And I think people who think, you live in Boulder or Aspen or some nice place, and you're going to not use natural gas anymore, and you're going to cut down, and you're going to sue oil companies, as Boulder is doing, which is just patently absurd.
It is.
Few cities use as much fossil fuel per capita as Boulder does, because those are lavish lifestyles.
Right.
And they're suing, and they think, well, we're helping all these causes we care about, minorities, the poor, because global warming hurts someone in a mobile home more than it does somebody in a brick house. Okay. Right. That's a real stretch when you consider the fact that by hoarding energy underground, whether you do it through expensive leases that prohibit production on public lands, or any other mechanism to discourage the production of traditional energy, you starve people. People die, and they are mostly minorities, non-Americans, the people who the left claims to have so much concern for. Can you address that?
Well, and yes, I totally agree. And it's as basic as looking at what it does to utility rates. When we have rising utility rates, for instance, who does that hurt? Does that hurt the millionaire? I mean, yeah, a little bit. Might make their utility rate go up. But for a single mom, they've got to decide, do I send my kid to camp or do I pay my utility bill? Well, they're going to not send their kid to camp. You're hurting the very people that the left says they care about when you do these kinds of things. And they unnecessarily drive up the cost of energy. I mean, look, Colorado's a great example. I mean, all these green energy mandates that we're doing, unrealistic green energy mandates where we just say, we can just snap our fingers and we'll be at zero emissions in, 2030 or something crazy. No thought as to by politicians as to whether or not that's actually even achievable to do, or how much it will cost. We don't even think about those things. The legislature of Colorado and the governor just pass a bill and say, well, we'll make it be done, and industry will figure out how to do it.
You know, you don't have to go to Africa or Mexico or South America to see the devastation that this anti-fossil fuel agenda has on the poor. I spent 17 years in Boulder before I moved between Colorado Springs and Denver. And everyone there claims to be some sort of an environmental prince. There's this environmental nobility there. And same thing in a lot of parts of Denver, upper-class parts of Denver, Aspen, all the resort towns in Colorado. All you have to do, and I've done this, is go to Pueblo, which is a working-class town, city, with about less than half the average per household income as the rest of the state. And it's primarily a minority populated city. And they are devastated by this. I spoke to a nun many times down there she's actually, an environmentalist and a liberal Democrat, I suspect. She leans that way. And she's just a very compassionate person, as a lot of old school liberals are, genuinely compassionate, as opposed to the hard left, which doesn't give a damn. But she is in the business of trying to keep people in their homes when they can't pay their energy bills, trying to keep their heat and their cooling on and keep the water running and the electricity flowing. And she will tell you firsthand how all of Colorado's anti-energy mandates, the so-called sustainable energy mandates and the goal of zero emissions by 2050 is putting people on the streets in Pueblo. Old people, disabled people, poor people who've lost their jobs. And it's so it happens right here in Colorado, and it happens globally. And I just don't think, I'd like to say most people on the left, these hard left environmentalists, don't understand that. If they do, they're just mean.
Yeah. But it's good that she connects it. That's the problem, is a lot of people don't connect it to the policy. And they just say, well, gee, it's just getting more and more expensive. And they don't actually connect it back to the decision that government made or that a legislative body made that's causing their pain. And that's what's important, is we need to make those connections for people so that they understand there is a price to this, and it's paid by the poor. It's not paid by the wealthy.
Well, let's move on to another issue I'd like to discuss, and that is the resolution that Gabe Evans put on the floor last week, I think it was, which was a resolution condemning the terrorist attack on Jews in Boulder.
Yep, right.
Now, wouldn't you think 100% of rational people, the kind of people who you would think get elected to public office, Congress, let alone, would want to condemn a terrorist attack on innocent Jews, mostly elderly? One of them was a Holocaust survivor who he tried to burn to death.
Right.
And 75 Democrats voted against this. Can you explain that to me?
Well, I wish I could, Wayne. I co-sponsored. I called when that happened, when that tragedy happened. I called Joe Nagoose, who represents the Boulder area, and I left him a voicemail and said, hey, Joe, I'm sorry about this. Let me know how I can help. Maybe we could co-sponsor a resolution condemning this. And especially when I found out that the perpetrator of this act lived in my district, lived, 15 minutes from my house.
That's right. He drove up from Colorado Springs.
Right. Yeah. So I tried to do that. Joe and I didn't get connected, but we got in this debate down on the House floor. They wanted, the Democrats wanted a resolution that just went after the attack itself. And Gabe Evans' resolution not only went after the attack, but it also talked about the importance of federal government and other governments working together. And it commended the law enforcement. I think what triggered many on the left and why some of the members didn't vote for that is that it actually thanked law enforcement, including ICE agents specifically, but also just talked about the importance of governments working with one another to solve problems in our society. Now, that used to be a given. That used to be something that I think we all agreed upon. But for some reason, that's controversial now. I don't know why, but in some Democrat circles, it's controversial.
Well, and you mentioned that this thanked law enforcement, including ICE. Now, had ICE been able to do its job the way it is now, that man might not have been here to commit the terrorist act. He was, in fact, an illegal immigrant who came here with a radical agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not only that, our state, through the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, knew that because he applied to buy a firearm and he was denied because he was not legal here. He was not a legal citizen of the United States. The Biden FBI knew that he was not legal because of that. But nobody ever called ICE and said, hey, by the way, this guy just tried to buy a gun. He's here illegally. You maybe should know that. Because if they would have, ICE could have gone and picked him up. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing is, and we've talked about this many times before, Wayne, personally, the state of Colorado is a sanctuary state. And we've got a governor who doesn't want to work with the federal government, to get these folks out of here. And because of that, you've got this guy was here on a work visa. His visa expired. And then after his visa expired, Colorado gave him a driver's license. They issued him a driver's license, or as I call it, a sanctuary pass, so that he could go out and do whatever he wanted to do. Why would we do that? If he's there and he comes in to get a driver's license, why aren't we saying, he's not here legally, this guy tried to get, why can't we share that list with the federal government and let the federal government enforce the law?
For those listeners and viewers who don't know and don't understand this, Colorado has passed laws, and so has Denver and Boulder and a number of Colorado cities, that make Colorado perhaps the most attractive place in the United States to be an illegal immigrant. Law enforcement is actively obstructed by the law from cooperating with ICE, from even communicating with ICE, from even letting them into certain public buildings. They are treated like criminals when they come in, when they try to work in our state. So Denver has had between 40 and 50,000 illegal immigrants, many of them from Venezuela, come in here in the last 2.5 years. And the Colorado legislature has decriminalized all illicit hard drugs and a lot of crimes, such as car thievery, which they've reversed on that a little bit. But at one point, Colorado was the it had the first highest rate of car theft in the country. Now we have the second highest teenage drug overdose death rate in the country. And as of last week, U.S. News and World Report moved us from the third most dangerous state in the country to the second most dangerous state in the country. Wouldn't you think that would be New Jersey or Michigan or maybe California?
Right.
No, it's Colorado. When I moved here in 1992 from Washington, D.C., my wife is a Colorado native, so we moved back here. Crime was unheard of. And I had come from Washington, D.C., and I'm like, this is just unbelievable. You don't even have to lock your doors. We lived in Boulder. We didn't lock our doors. I left my wallet on top of my car for half a day, and somebody walked up to the door, knocked on the door, and handed me my wallet, which was full of cash.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing.
That was Colorado 1992. Now, even if you lock your car, it's likely to be stolen.
Right.
I have a colleague up in Denver. You might know Jimmy Sangenberger.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy had his car stolen 3 times
in a year. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and look, this is the reality of these insane laws that Colorado is passing. And, we try and point it out. They seem to reverse just enough to survive the political storm. And then they put their foot on the gas again here in Colorado. And, there is a price to pay for all of this, right? And we're seeing that in rising crime. We're seeing it in the livability. I mean, do people still want to come to a state that's like this? And we're going to start paying that price.
We're seeing a net loss in population for the first time in 50 years.
Right.
We have always been a growth state. In fact, it was problematic growth. It was too many people move here too fast. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to make the roads big enough. It's hard to build enough houses. We're going the other direction now as a result of about 10 years of Democratic control of every element of Colorado governance. Actually, from 2018 on, Democrats have controlled every bit of Colorado governance except for a handful of congressional seats, such as yours. And it's not to say Democrats control it is to tread lightly. The fact is the Democratic Party has taken to appointing many members of the state legislature, and they appoint hard leftists, people who would not normally be elected in a primary.
Yeah.
And so we have a very far left governance of Colorado.
Yeah. And I just want to give you one quick example of that, right? Why government should cooperate. I know the state doesn't like to cooperate with the federal government. What happens in a bank robbery, right? A bank robbery, they call in the FBI because it's interstate commerce. The FBI comes in and helps. What happens to bank robbery in America if the FBI just says, we're not going to help states anymore do that? Or even, I'm going on a ride-along tonight with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I go on that. We pull over folks, and I've done these before, but we pull over somebody for expired tags. The city of Colorado Springs or the county of El Paso is enforcing the law for the state of Colorado to get them their money. Doesn't the federal government deserve that same courtesy from the state of Colorado? And isn't that what the citizens who pay taxes expect, is that governments will work with one another to keep a civil society?
Well, that's right. And if you cheat on your taxes, guess who it's going to be who comes in and makes that right? It's going to be the federal government.
Right.
Where are the far left legislators in blocking the IRS from cooperating or from being able to work in Colorado?
Right.
We haven't seen that one yet.
That's right. Haven't heard that example, but that's a great one.
Well, speaking of federal government and state government, and Mike Lee and I think some others in Congress, I'm not sure where you stand, I'll be interested to find out, want to sell off hundreds of thousands of acres of public lands. I got a letter saying from some outfit saying they didn't know where you stood, but we should pressure you because public lands are sacred. And I'm not so sure they're that sacred. We have a crisis with wildfires every summer now because they're so the federal forests are so poorly maintained. The American Land Council, every time I go to Western Conservative Summit or to CPAC or any kind of conservative conference of any magnitude, they tend to be there. And they have this famous picture that they show. George, maybe you could put that on the screen if you have it available, and it shows federal forest that is adjacent to private forest land. Mm-hmm. There you see it right there.
Yep.
And you can see the property line, and on the right is the private property land.
Right.
And on the left is the federal land. And there's nothing in common there because the federal government does not clear out the debris from these forests. I remember when a moth was going to kill all the trees west of Colorado Springs in the Broadmoor neighborhood and behind it. And I spoke to a forest official who said, well, the moth is just as natural. This is a predatory moth that kills trees. It's just as natural as the trees. So we don't want to do anything about it. And others intervened. The state intervened, and a lot of private interests, there's a lot of money in that area, intervened, and they killed the moths. But if it had been up to the federal government, the moths would have lived and the trees would have died. So I'm not sure it's a bad idea, personally, to sell off hundreds of thousands of acres. It would go toward paying down our debt, and it would make it easier to produce oil and gas on lands that are perfectly appropriate for that.
Well, I haven't seen any proposal from Mike Lee. You talk about Lee, and I do hear that there is some proposal that they're talking about putting in a reconciliation bill on selling public lands. Haven't seen what that is, so I don't want to comment on it until I know exactly what it is. I would say this, our public lands in many cases are a crown jewel. It's funny, though, that the same people sometimes who act as though they're the great protectors of that also want to lock it up and not let anybody go on it who, isn't a backpacker or a hiker. We have these issues, particularly here in Colorado, have a lot of issues with access, right? And they're doing roadless rules and, creating wilderness areas that most Americans can't ever even access. Most Americans can't get up there unless they're physically able to do though. But if you're disabled or you're elderly, you have no chance of seeing much of that because they're actually shutting that off. So it's the same people that are doing that. There's a lot of public land in America, and we look at states like Nevada, I think is about 70% or more of the state of Nevada is held by the federal government. 63% of Utah is owned by the federal government, off the tax rolls to the state.
Huge percent of Colorado.
And a huge percent of Colorado. I don't know what we are now, but probably well over 50%, right?
Yes, I believe we're over 50.
Yeah.
By quite a bit.
Yeah, so that just because we have that doesn't mean that every acre of federal land isn't a crown jewel, right?
Right.
I mean, there is a lot of BLM land. There's BLM land in Utah. I'm going antelope hunting in Utah here in September, and I was looking at the map of it, and it's all oil. It's all oil and gas land. Yeah. There's oil rigs every 2 acres on that BLM land. Does it make sense to maybe sell some of that off? I don't know. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we ought to at least have a discussion.
As the American Council on Land, what did I call it? The American Land Council shows us, and they make a great case for it. If you go to their website, AmericanLandCouncil.org, I believe it is, that privately held land is better cared for. It's more pristine than federally cared for land and owned land. I know you got to go, so I want to get to one more thing before you do.
Well, and let me say one last thing real quick on that. I mean, I'm a hunter. I'm an outdoorsman. I've spent my whole life doing that. Land is important to me, and it's important to me. That's what I love about the West. I want to preserve that land, and you do too, and that's what you're saying is we want to make sure that it is preserved. Sometimes the federal government doesn't do the best job in preserving that. And we want to figure out ways in which we can do a better job of protecting that federal land.
The big, beautiful bill.
Yes.
One of your colleagues, a Colorado colleague in Congress, this would be Senator John Hickenlooper. He says, and he's been going nuts on X with tweets about how bad this bill is, saying this is one big, beautiful bill for Donald Trump and the ultra-wealthy. It's devastating for working families. Well, I find that a little weird and hard to believe, given that John Hickenlooper, speaking of the super wealthy, by the way, he is among them, and he made that fortune with the help of working class waiters and waitresses and restaurant staff. This bill will eliminate taxes on tips for the very people who made him wealthy.
Sure.
And, that's fine. I'm glad that, everybody needs people working for them if they're going to become wealthy. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But why can't they also be wealthy?
Right.
And this will make it. I know a man who supports his family on a waiter's salary, and this is going to change his life substantially.
Yeah.
How is this devastating to working families? I don't see his point there. It keeps the child tax credit from expiring and indexes the 2000 maximum credit to inflation. It raises child tax credit phase out. Now the 400,000 limit for joint filers would drop to 110,000. How could this bill not possibly help the working and lower class, in fact?
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. And this is what's been such a problem here is there's such misinformation is kind of too kind of a word for what's happening here because quite honestly, there's a lot of people that are lying about what's in this bill. First of all, what I would say to Senator Hickenlooper is if he's going to vote against this bill, let's talk about what he's voting against or what he's voting for. He's voting for a $4.5 trillion tax increase on the American people to include an average of $2,000 per family. He's voting against making tips not be taxable. He's voting against all of these tax provisions that are about to expire. So he's voting for a $4.5 trillion tax increase. He's also voting in favor. If he votes against the bill, he's going to vote against $150 billion increase in defense spending for our military. Right?
Amazing.
Which is Last time I checked, what the Constitution says is one of the prime responsibilities of the federal government. What else is he voting against? He's voting against putting work requirements on able-bodied people who are Medicaid recipients, not people who are disabled. We're not touching those benefits. He's voting against stopping illegal immigrants from taking Medicaid, as they do here in Colorado for up to 90 days. There's so much good in this bill. It's amazing to listen to them talk about this bill, and they just flat out, in many cases, the left just lies about what is in this bill. I mean, I've heard people talk about that. Oh, you know, all the disabled people that are going to be off of Medicaid if this bill passes. Medicaid was intended for disabled people, not for 35-year-old people who live in their parents' basement and refuse to work. So this is resetting it so that Medicaid is there for the long term for people who it was intended to help.
That's right. I've looked at a study that shows how much longer the waits are for the previous Medicaid recipients.
Yep.
To get appointments is almost impossible because we've added the 35-year-old able-bodied male who lives in mommy's basement.
Right. And let's just be honest about it. The reason they were added is because most of the people who added it under Obamacare and the expansion of Medicaid out throughout the states, they're people who believe in a single-payer healthcare system. They want to get more people getting paid, having their healthcare run by the government as opposed to private insurance. So this was their intention all along, was to get as many people as they could on this program. But the problem with that is it's going to crash the program.
All right. Well, thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate you being here today. And
Wayne,
I'd love to visit with you again sometime. We could talk for hours.
Well, we can. I'll come back. I love it. I appreciate you doing this, and I wish you the very best on this podcast. I know it's going to explode. You're one of the great minds. You always have been. I love all your written word, and now to hear it in this form is even better.
Well, thank you. I'm as Wayne Campbell of Wayne's World would say, I'm not worthy, but thank you very much.
Not
Jeff.
worthy. You got it.
Great to
all
see
right,
you.
Wayne.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Take care.
You bet.